I always told myself I could endure anything. That's what you learn when you're married to someone like Andrew. You convince yourself that the bruises are just bad moods, that the silence is just tiredness, that the shouting is just stress. You build excuses like little sandcastles, hoping the tide won't come crashing in. But tides always do. That night, the night everything shattered for me, it wasn't even the worst fight we'd ever had. It was just enough. Andrew came home late, smelling like whiskey and cigarette smoke, the way he always did when he'd been out with his so-called friends. Timothy was already asleep, thank God. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a sewing kit in front of me. Sewing had always been my quiet rebellion, my little corner of peace in a life full of storms. "What is this now?" he sneered, pointing at the half-finished dress spread out on the table. "You think you're some kind of designer?" "It's just a hobby," I said quietly, keeping my eyes on the needle so I wouldn't meet his. "It keeps me busy." "Busy?" He barked out a laugh that made my stomach twist. "Busy wasting time when you should be focusing on this family." By family, he always meant himself. He grabbed the fabric and ripped it in two, tossing the pieces on the floor. Something inside me cracked with it. Not fear this time. Something harder, sharper. Something that felt almost like rage. I stood up taller than I thought I could be. "Don't do that again." The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and I could see the storm gathering in him. Usually, I'd back down, apologize, smooth things over. But not that night. Not anymore. Maybe it was the look in Timothy's face earlier that evening, when he'd asked if Daddy would be home for bedtime and I'd had to lie again. Maybe it was the ache in my bones from years of carrying fear like a second skin. Maybe it was just the simple fact that my dress, my work, my peace, was lying shredded at my feet. Whatever it was, I grabbed my son's backpack, shoved some clothes into it, and told Andrew, "We're leaving." His face twisted into something ugly. "You think you can walk out on me? You think anyone will take you in? You're nothing without me, Lois." Nothing. But I didn't answer. I just took Timothy's hand and walked out the door. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would break through my chest, but my grip on my son's small hand was steady. We didn't take much. Just enough to get through the night. The air outside felt like freedom and fear all at once. It was cold, sharp against my cheeks, but I breathed it in like I hadn't breathed in years. Timothy looked up at me with wide, sleepy eyes. "Mommy, where are we going?" I knelt down, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart. Somewhere better." The truth was, I didn't know where. Not yet. I had no plan, no money, and no one to call at that hour. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I couldn't go back. We ended up at a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon lights and a front desk clerk who barely looked up from his TV as I paid in cash. The room smelled like mildew and cigarettes, but Timothy curled up on the bed and fell asleep almost instantly, his small body finally relaxing. I sat in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The fear, the uncertainty, the voice in my head whispering Andrew's words, "You're nothing without me." But then I looked at Timothy, his chest rising and falling peacefully, and I felt something shift. I wasn't nothing. I was his mother. And that meant I had to be everything. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. Instead, I made myself a promise. This was the end of my old life. And the beginning of something new. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know where. But for the first time in years, I felt the faintest spark of hope. And once a spark is lit, it only takes time before it turns into fire. When the morning light crept through the motel curtains, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exhaustion. My body ached from lying stiff all night, my ears still tuned for footsteps that never came. Timothy stirred beside me, his little hand clutching the pillow like a lifeline. I brushed his hair back and whispered, "We're okay." The words were fragile, but saying them out loud gave them weight. I didn't have a plan, not yet. Just a credit card with barely anything left on it, a suitcase with too few clothes, and a son who trusted me completely. That trust terrified me more than Andrew ever had. By noon, my phone buzzed. I almost dropped it. For a moment, I thought it might be Andrew, but the name glowing on the screen froze me just as much. Claire. My mother-in-law. No, my late mother-in-law. I blinked at the message. A group chat notification. Someone had tagged me in the announcement. With heavy hearts, we share the passing of Claire Patterson. Claire was gone. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my chest hollow. Claire had been the only gentle soul in Andrew's family. She wasn't perfect, but she saw me. She used to slip extra food into our bags after dinner, whisper encouragement when Andrew's temper cut me down, sneak tiny gifts for Timothy, like the wooden toy truck he never let go of. And now she was gone. I didn't even realize I was crying until Timothy wiped at my cheek with his small hand. Mommy? Did Daddy hurt you again? The innocence in his voice shattered me. I pulled him close, pressing my face into his hair. No, baby. Not this time. Not this time. And never again, I promised myself. But Claire, the one person who ever made that house feel less like a prison, she was gone. And despite everything, despite my escape, I knew I had to go to the funeral. I told myself it was for Timothy. He deserved a chance to say goodbye to the grandmother who had loved him so fiercely. But deep down, I knew it was for me too. The church was across town, the kind of place where the white paint peeled from the siding, but the bells still rang proud. I wore the plainest black dress I had, my hair tied back, my hands trembling the whole drive. When we walked in, heads turned. The whispers spread like wildfire. She left him. She walked out. I could feel their judgment clinging to me like smoke. And then I saw him. Andrew. Standing near the casket, shoulders squared, jaw tight, like grief was something to be conquered instead of felt. His eyes found me instantly. For one heartbeat, the world went silent. Then his expression darkened, and I felt that old, familiar chill crawl up my spine. I almost turned and left. Almost. But then Timothy tugged at my hand, pulling me toward the casket. His little face was so serious, so brave. I followed him, ignoring Andrew's glare. Claire looked peaceful. Too peaceful, almost unreal. I brushed a hand over Timothy's shoulder as he whispered, "Bye, Grandma." When I looked down, something caught my eye. Tucked beneath Claire's folded hands was a small envelope, addressed in her delicate handwriting. To me. My heart hammered. I glanced around. No one else seemed to notice. My fingers trembled as I slid the envelope free, tucking it into my purse before anyone could see. Andrew's stare burned into me the whole time. I didn't linger. After the service, I avoided the gathering line of family and slipped out the side door with Timothy. The cold air outside hit me like a rush of water, but I couldn't stop shaking. In the car, I pulled the envelope out. My name was written in her graceful script, Lois. My throat tightened. Timothy leaned forward. "What is it, Mommy?" I pressed the letter to my chest. "Something from Grandma," I whispered. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Not while Andrew was still just a few steps behind me. As I drove away, my hands gripping the wheel tight, I knew this letter was more than a goodbye. It was a secret. A message meant only for me. And somehow I already knew it would change everything. I didn't open Claire's letter right away. For 2 days, it sat in my purse, tucked between a half-empty pack of tissues and Timothy's toy truck. Every time I reached in, my fingers brushed against the envelope, and my chest tightened. It wasn't fear of what it might say. It was the weight of it. Claire hadn't been careless in her life. Every word, every gesture had meaning. If she'd left me a letter, then she had known something, planned something. And whatever it was, she hadn't wanted Andrew to know. That truth alone both terrified and comforted me. We were still in the motel, the wallpaper peeling, the air conditioner rattling, when I finally gave in. Timothy was drawing in his notebook, humming to himself. I sat at the small wooden table, turned the envelope over in my hands, and slid a finger under the seal. Her handwriting was neat, careful, like every letter had been pressed with love. "My dear Lois," it began. I had to stop and breathe before reading further. "If you are holding this letter, then my time has ended. I want you to know something I've never been able to say out loud. I saw you. I saw the pain you carried. I saw the way Andrew broke you down. And I saw your strength, even when you didn't believe it yourself. You have always been more than enough, Lois. Never forget that. My eyes blurred. I pressed the paper against my chest, swallowing back the sob that rose like fire in my throat. She had seen me. All this time someone had seen me. I read on. I don't know what Andrew will become without me, but I do know this. I made arrangements for you and Timothy. My lawyer will guide you. Enclosed are the keys to a small apartment in Fairhill, 2 towns over, and the deed to a sewing workshop. It isn't much, but it's a beginning. Yours. Free from him. A place to build the life you deserve. I froze. My heart thundered. An apartment? A workshop? I glanced down. Taped inside the letter were 2 keys. One brass, one silver, shining faintly in the dim motel light. Please, Lois, take this chance. Use your gift. Build something beautiful. Raise Timothy in a place where laughter comes easily, where he can grow without fear. Promise me you won't go back. I couldn't stop the tears this time. They spilled hot down my cheeks as I pressed the letter to my lips. Timothy looked up, curious. Mommy? What's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. My voice trembled. Grandma just left us a gift. He tilted his head. Like a toy. I smiled through the tears, brushing his cheek. Better than a toy. A new start. That night, for the first time since leaving Andrew, I let myself dream. I imagined a little apartment filled with sunlight. A workshop with rolls of fabric stacked against the walls, the hum of a sewing machine, the smell of coffee brewing. I imagined Timothy laughing without fear of footsteps stomping down the hall. It felt almost too good to be real. But reality always finds a way of reminding you it's there. The following morning, my phone lit up again. Andrew. I froze, staring at his name on the screen. My stomach knotted, my fingers slick with sweat. He had never texted this much before. He usually called, yelled, demanded. This time the message was short. We need to talk. Come home. Home. The word turned my stomach. I turned the phone face down, my pulse racing. I couldn't let him pull me back. Not when Claire had given me this chance. And yet, the fear clung to me. He knew me too well. He knew how to twist words until I doubted myself. I shoved the phone deep into my bag. Mommy. Timothy's voice was soft. Can we go to the new place? I looked at him, his hopeful eyes shining like little lanterns. And I knew. There wasn't a choice anymore. We were leaving. I packed what little we had into the suitcase. The motel key clinked against the dresser as I set it down. With Claire's letter folded safely in my purse and the keys cold against my palm, I took Timothy's hand. Ready? I asked. He grinned. Ready. As we stepped into the sunlight, I whispered to myself, This is it, Claire. I promise. The car engine sputtered to life, and I pulled onto the road toward Fairhill, the town where our second chance waited. But as the motel disappeared in the rearview mirror, so did the illusion of safety. Because deep down, I knew Andrew wouldn't let us go that easily. And whatever Claire had left for me in Fairhill, it wasn't just a gift. It was going to be a test. The road to Fairhill stretched longer than I remembered from the few times Andrew had driven us through. Maybe it was just nerves, or maybe it was the weight of everything riding on this trip, but each mile felt like a lifetime. Timothy pressed his face against the car window, watching the blur of trees. Is it far, Mommy? Not too far, I told him, though my voice was thin with exhaustion. We're almost there. The truth was, I didn't know what there even looked like. Claire's letter had painted a picture, but what if I arrived and found only disappointment? What if the apartment was falling apart, the workshop crumbling? What if this gift was nothing more than a dream I couldn't afford to hold? Still, when the sign appeared, Welcome to Fairhill ***, my chest tightened with something like hope. Fairhill wasn't flashy. It was a small town with brick storefronts, tidy sidewalks, and trees lining the streets like old guardians. It felt slower than where I'd come from. Like a place where people might actually know your name, where you could walk without keeping your head down. I followed the directions Claire had left, my hands gripping the wheel tight. When we pulled up to the address, I sucked in a breath. The apartment building wasn't grand, but it was solid. A three-story brick building with flower boxes in the windows and a faded green awning above the door. Kids' bikes leaned against the railing, and laundry fluttered from a balcony. It looked lived in. Safe. Is this it? Timothy whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the moment. I smiled faintly. I think so. The brass key slid into the lock with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting for me. When the door swung open, sunlight spilled across the floorboards. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender. It wasn't big, 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen with mismatched cabinets, a living room with a sagging couch, but it was clean, warm, real. And it was ours. Timothy ran from room to room laughing. This is my room. This one's mine. He flopped onto the bed, bouncing, his joy filling the air like music. For the first time in years, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I opened Claire's letter again, reading the line about the workshop. The silver key was heavier in my palm, carrying a different kind of promise. The workshop was just a few blocks away, tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. The windows were dusty, the sign above the door faded, but when I unlocked it and stepped inside, something stirred in me. It smelled of wood and fabric, of something waiting to be reborn. Bolts of cloth leaned against the walls, a sturdy sewing table sat in the corner, and shelves lined with thread spools shimmered like tiny jewels. My throat tightened. This was more than a gift. This was freedom, carefully built and tucked away, waiting for me. Timothy twirled in the middle of the room, his arms spread wide. It's like Grandma knew you'd need this. I swallowed hard. She did. That night, after Timothy finally fell asleep in his new bed, I sat in the workshop alone. I ran my fingers over the fabric, the sewing machine, the neat rows of thread. I thought about all the nights I'd stitched quietly at the kitchen table, trying to piece myself together with scraps of cloth. Now I had a space of my own. A space to build not just clothes, but a life. But peace never lasts long. My phone buzzed on the table. I hesitated before picking it up. Another message from Andrew. I know where you are. Don't think you can hide from me. My stomach dropped. The workshop walls felt suddenly too close, the shadows darker. I shoved the phone away, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. He didn't know, I told myself. He was bluffing, trying to scare me. But Andrew didn't bluff. I looked around the workshop at the threads, the fabric, the tools Claire had left behind. I wanted this space to be a sanctuary, a place of creation, not fear. But as long as Andrew was out there hunting, it would never be that simple. Still, I whispered to the empty room, I'm not going back. Not this time. And for the first time, I almost believed it. The first morning in Fairhill didn't feel real. Sunlight spilled through thin curtains, casting gold across the wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of bread from the bakery down the street. For a few heartbeats, I let myself believe this was home, not just hiding. Timothy padded into the kitchen, hair sticking up in all directions, holding his toy truck. Is this really our house now, Mommy? I pulled him close and kissed the top of his head. Yes, sweetheart. Ours. Saying it out loud gave the words weight. Like if I repeated them enough, they'd harden into truth. After breakfast, I walked to the workshop with the silver key clutched in my hand. The town was waking up, a man sweeping the bakery steps, an old woman watering her flowers, kids racing by on bikes. No one stared. No whispers followed me. It was strange, unsettling even, to feel invisible in a good way. The workshop door creaked as I unlocked it. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, the air thick with the quiet promise of work. I brushed my hand across the sewing table, the grain of the wood smooth beneath my fingers. This was supposed to be a fresh start. And fresh starts had to begin somewhere. I chose a bolt of fabric from the corner, a soft blue cotton that reminded me of calm skies. My hands shook as I threaded the needle. The first stitch wasn't neat. The second wasn't much better. But by the third, my rhythm returned. Sewing had always been my anchor. Every pull of the thread was like a breath, every seam a small act of control. For years, Andrew had told me it was a waste of time. Sitting there, stitching in Claire's workshop, I realized it had been my lifeline all along. The bell above the door jingled. I froze. Hello, a voice called. I looked up to see a woman stepping inside. She was around my age, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and paint smudges on her hands. She smiled, easy and warm. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. I'm Anna. I run the little art studio down the street. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. Lois. I just moved in. Her eyes lit with recognition. Claire's place. I thought so. She mentioned once she wanted to pass it on. Your family? The knot in my throat tightened. Her daughter-in-law. Anna's smile softened. Then welcome. Claire was special. She helped more people in this town than she ever let on. You'll like it here. Something in her tone eased me. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry about Andrew, didn't look at me with pity. She just welcomed me. Before leaving, she added, if you ever need anything, even just coffee, come by. When the door closed behind her, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. Maybe Claire had known I wouldn't just need space. I'd need people too. By the afternoon, Timothy wandered in with a juice box, watching me work. Are you making something for me? He asked. I smiled. Always. I showed him how to guide the fabric, his little hands hovering over mine. His laughter filled the workshop, and for a moment, the fear of Andrew's text the night before faded. But only for a moment. That evening, as I locked up, I noticed something across the street. A car parked too long. A man's silhouette behind the wheel. My pulse spiked, cold and sharp. I pulled Timothy close, walking faster toward the apartment. By the time I glanced back, the car was gone. Inside, Timothy chattered about his day, his toy truck bumping along the couch cushions. I tried to smile, to nod at the right moments, but my mind was elsewhere. Andrew's words echoed, I know where you are. Was it him in that car? Was he watching already? Or was I just letting fear twist shadows into monsters? I sat at the sewing table late into the night, stitching long after Timothy had fallen asleep. Each seam felt like defiance, like a whisper to myself. You're not powerless anymore. You're building something. You belong here. But as the clock ticked past midnight, the street outside too quiet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past was already closing in. And that first stitch I'd made this morning, it wasn't just the start of a dress. It was the start of a fight.